There is an automatic movement that you have probably seen hundreds of times, even if you do not know it. It does not matter if you buy a watch for 100 euros, for 300, or even for more than 1,000. There is a high chance that under that dial, exactly the same heart is beating. A Japanese movement that has conquered modern watchmaking. It is used by micro-brands, it is used by established brands, it is used by manufacturers all over the world, and millions of units have been produced. But how did a single movement come to dominate practically the entire market for affordable automatic watches? What is so special about it? And why do so many brands trust it over any other caliber? Today, you will discover the story of the Seiko NH35, the movement that changed automatic watchmaking forever. In this documentary, we will learn the history of the NH35 from its origins. We will see how it works inside, discover why it is so reliable, why practically any watchmaker knows how to repair it, and what advantages it offers over other automatic movements. We will also talk about its weak points. Because yes, although many consider it the king of affordable watchmaking, it is not perfect. First, we will travel to Japan to discover how this movement was born. Next, we will disassemble the NH35 piece by piece to understand how it works. Later, we will see why hundreds of manufacturers decided to adopt it. And we will finish by answering a very simple question. Is it still the best value automatic movement in the world? Let us begin. The birth of the king. For decades, when someone spoke of reliable automatic movements, one name dominated practically the entire industry: ETA. The Swiss company supplied movements to hundreds of manufacturers, from small independent brands to firms of enormous prestige. It was the standard. If you wanted to make a quality automatic watch, the normal thing was to buy an ETA. But everything changed. At the beginning of the 2000s, the Swatch Group, owner of ETA, began to gradually reduce the supply of movements to other companies. The news hit like a bombshell. Suddenly, many brands needed an alternative, and that was when Japan seized the opportunity. While Switzerland turned off the tap, Seiko opened the doors. Seiko's bet. Although most know Seiko for their own watches, the company had been developing extraordinarily reliable movements for decades. Many of them were created solely to equip Seiko watches, but the company decided to go a step further. Through Seiko Instruments Incorporated, known as SII, they began manufacturing movements intended for other brands. The goal was very simple: to create robust, easy-to-maintain, affordable calibers capable of running for decades. That is how a family that would change the industry was born, the NH movements. And among them all, there was one that stood out above the rest: the NH35. An old acquaintance. Although it may seem like a completely new movement, the NH35 actually has a much longer history. Its design derives directly from the famous 4R35, the movement that Seiko had been using for years in watches like the Seiko 5 Sports, Presage, and entry-level prospects. In other words, the NH35 was not an experiment. It had already proven its reliability for years in thousands of watches sold all over the world. All Seiko did was adapt it so any manufacturer could buy and install it in their own watches, a decision that would change modern watchmaking forever. An unstoppable success. What happened next exceeded all expectations. Micro-brands, European manufacturers, American brands, Chinese companies, new projects born on Kickstarter, all found exactly the same thing: a reliable, inexpensive, very easy-to-repair Japanese movement backed by one of the most important watch companies on the planet. In just a few years, the NH35 began appearing absolutely everywhere, and today it is practically impossible to walk through a watch fair, enter an online store, or browse the internet for a few minutes without finding dozens of watches powered by this small Japanese movement. But what is really inside it to have convinced the entire industry? How does the Seiko NH35 work? Before understanding why the NH35 conquered the market, we first have to open it. because although it may look like a small metal disc from the outside, more than 100 components work inside with extraordinary precision. Each wheel, each spring, each jewel has a single mission: to keep time moving. And it all starts with the part you probably already know: the rotor. The rotor. When you wear an automatic watch, it never really stops moving. Every step, every turn of the wrist, every small movement of the arm makes a large semicircular mass of metal spin freely over the movement. That component is called the rotor, and it is the true engine of the automatic system. Unlike a quartz watch, which runs on a battery, the NH35 gets its energy directly from you. The more you use the watch, the more energy it stores. It needs no batteries, no chargers, just movement. The barrel. But the rotor does not move the hands directly. What it actually does is wind a very special spring, the mainspring. This huge spring remains coiled inside a small cylinder called the barrel. We could compare it to a mechanical battery. Each turn of the rotor slightly winds that spring, and when the rotor stops moving, the spring begins to slowly unwind, releasing energy steadily for approximately 41 hours. That is the official power reserve of the NH35. In other words, you can leave the watch on the table for almost 2 full days, and it will keep running. The gear train. All that energy cannot reach the hands at once. It would be impossible to read the time. That is why the gear train exists, a chain formed by several toothed wheels that transmit the force from the barrel to the escapement. Each gear reduces the speed of the previous one, carefully controlling the energy. It is a true work of engineering, because everything happens solely through the contact between small metal parts, without electricity, without electronics, just mechanics. The escapement. Here we find the true heart of the watch. The escapement is in charge of distributing the energy little by little. If the barrel were to release all its force at once, the watch would stop working in just a few seconds. The escapement prevents exactly that. It releases tiny amounts of energy thousands of times a day with surprising precision. Each small impulse keeps the balance wheel alive, and it is precisely the balance wheel that sets the rhythm of time. The balance wheel. Many watchmakers consider the balance wheel to be the true heart of a mechanical watch, and they are not wrong. It oscillates back and forth 6 times every second. That means the NH35 works at a frequency of 21,600 vibrations per hour, a very balanced figure. It does not seek to break precision records, nor does it aim to offer the smoothest sweep on the market. Its goal is different: to be reliable, reduce wear, and keep running for decades. And that is precisely where much of its success lies. The jewels. There is a detail that appears on almost every automatic watch. 24 jewels, or, in this case, 24 rubies. They are not decorative gemstones, nor do they increase the watch's value. Their function is much more important. Synthetic rubies act as small bearings, greatly reducing friction between the metal shafts, which means less wear, greater efficiency, and a much longer lifespan. Without them, the components would end up deteriorating much sooner. Diashock. Another little-known detail of the NH35 is that it incorporates the Diashock system, a mechanism developed by Seiko to protect the balance staff from shocks. It is similar to the famous Inca block used by many Swiss brands. If the watch receives an impact, the system absorbs part of that energy, considerably reducing the risk of breaking the movement's most delicate component. It might not make the NH35 an indestructible watch, but it is much more resistant for daily use. Manual winding for many years. The most affordable automatic watches had a major limitation. They could not be wound manually. It was necessary to move or shake them until they started working. The NH35 solved that problem. By simply turning the crown, we can directly wind the mainspring, which is especially useful if the watch has been stopped for several days. It is a small detail, but it greatly improves the user experience. Hacking seconds. Another detail highly valued by enthusiasts is the hacking function or second stop. When we pull out the crown to set the time, the second hand stops completely. This allows us to synchronize the watch with an exact time signal. It may seem like a simple feature, but for many years it was only present in much more expensive movements. Today, it is practically essential, and the NH35 includes it as standard. A movement built to last. If we look at all its features together, it starts to become clear why this movement has won over so many manufacturers. It does not try to be the most precise, nor the most sophisticated, nor the most visually spectacular. Everything about it has a single purpose: to function for many years with the least maintenance possible. And that very philosophy is what convinced hundreds of brands around the world. But if there are so many automatic movements on the market, why did almost everyone end up choosing exactly this one? The answer goes far beyond engineering and has a lot to do with the modern watchmaking business. Why is the NH35 in millions of watches? After discovering how the NH35 works, only one big question remains. Why is this movement in millions of watches? Why did hundreds of different brands decide to trust it specifically? The answer is not just in its engineering, it is also in the perfect timing. For many years, most manufacturers relied on Swiss movements from ETA. But when the Swatch Group began to reduce supply to other companies, the industry needed an alternative. And Seiko was ready. Through Time Module Incorporated, known as TMI, they began selling their movements to manufacturers all over the world. Among all of them, one quickly stood out: the NH35. And not because it was the most precise or the most advanced, but because it offered exactly what any brand needed: reliability, durability, a competitive price, and simple maintenance. For a company wanting to launch an automatic watch, it was the perfect solution. They did not need to develop their own movement. They simply installed an NH35 and offered their customers a caliber backed by decades of Seiko experience. Over the years, micro-brands began to multiply. Companies like Zelos, Phoibos, Boulder, Spinnaker, and McLean found in the NH35 a movement capable of offering confidence from day one. The same happened with many Asian brands like San Martin, Baltony, Steel Dive, or Addis Dive. They were all looking for the same thing: a reliable movement, easy to repair, with spare parts available practically anywhere in the world. But its success does not end there. Around the NH35, an entire community of modding enthusiasts was born. Today, there are thousands of hands, dials, cases, and compatible parts that allow you to create a completely custom watch. Few movements have generated such a large ecosystem, and that is probably the true reason for its success. The NH35 never aimed to be the most exclusive movement. It aimed to be the movement any manufacturer could trust. And seeing that after so many years it still beats in millions of watches, it is clear it met its goal. But being so popular also has a price, because the NH35 is not perfect. And in the next section, we will discover its greatest limitations. Is it really that good? The advantages of the NH35. After everything we have seen, it is easy to think the NH35 is the perfect movement, but it is not. What it has proven is to be one of the most reliable automatic movements in its category. Its greatest virtue is precisely that: reliability. It is designed to work for years, enduring small knocks, vibrations, and daily use without complications. It is no coincidence that so many brands use it in diving, adventure, or heavy-duty watches. Another of its great advantages is maintenance. Practically any watchmaker knows the NH35, knows how to regulate it, and finding spare parts is relatively simple. That makes maintaining a watch with this movement much more affordable and easier than with other more exclusive calibers. As for accuracy, Seiko states a tolerance of between -20 and +40 seconds per day. It may seem high, but it is a very conservative figure. In practice, many NH35s run with deviations of less than 10 seconds a day, and, after proper regulation, can even get close to 3 or 4 seconds per day. Its power reserve is around 41 hours, enough for daily use. If you wear the watch every day, it will hardly ever stop. And although there are movements with much longer power reserves today, for years this figure was the industry standard. But perhaps the greatest advantage of the NH35 is the peace of mind it provides. It is a proven movement with millions of units running all over the world. Brands know it will cause few problems, and buyers know exactly what to expect from it. However, just because it is so reliable does not mean it is perfect. Like any movement, it also has its limitations, and some of them explain why certain enthusiasts still prefer other calibers. The weak points of the NH35. After everything we have seen, it is clear that the NH35 is a great movement, but that does not mean it is perfect. Like any caliber, it also has its limitations. The first is its accuracy. Seiko declares an official tolerance of between -20 and +40 seconds per day, a fairly wide figure if we compare it with higher-end Swiss movements. It is true that many NH35s perform much better than the specifications indicate, but that variability means two identical watches can offer different results. Another aspect to consider is its frequency of 21,600 vibrations per hour. This provides a fairly smooth sweep of the second hand, though not as smooth as movements with 28,800 vibrations, such as the ETA 2824, the Sellita SW200, or even the Miyota 9015. It is a subtle difference, but experienced enthusiasts usually appreciate it. It does not stand out for its aesthetics either. If we look at an NH35 through an exhibition case back, we will find a movement with very simple finishes. Everything is designed to be functional and durable, not to be visually impressive. Some brands decorate the rotor, but the base of the movement remains completely industrial. And although its 41 hours of power reserve are still enough for most users, today there are movements that easily exceed 70 or 80 hours. That means, if you leave an NH35 watch unused all weekend, you might have to set the time again. Finally, its huge popularity also works against it. Since it is present in thousands of different models, some enthusiasts feel it has lost some of its exclusivity, especially when it appears in watches costing several hundred euros. However, that same popularity also proves something very important. If hundreds of brands around the world still trust the NH35 after so many years, it is because it has proven to be a reliable, durable movement capable of delivering exactly what it promises. But the NH35 is not alone. It has very interesting rivals in Japan, Switzerland, and even China. So the next question is inevitable. How does it really compare to them? Is it still the king in 2026? After learning its history, understanding how it works, and analyzing its advantages as well as its limitations, only one final question remains. Is the Seiko NH35 still the king of value-for-money automatic movements? The answer is yes. Not because it is the most accurate, nor the most advanced, nor the most exclusive, but because very few movements have managed to offer so much for so long. The NH35 changed modern watchmaking. It allowed hundreds of brands to launch reliable automatic watches without needing to develop their own caliber. Thanks to it, countless micro-brands were born, increasingly original designs appeared, and millions of people were able to get into mechanical watchmaking without making a large investment. That has probably been its greatest achievement. Not competing with high-end watchmaking, but making a quality automatic watch accessible to almost anyone. And perhaps that is why it is still so highly recommended. When you read NH35 on a watch's spec sheet, you already know what to expect. A proven, reliable movement with spare parts available that practically any watchmaker can maintain for many years. In a market where new movements constantly appear, promising better figures and more advanced technologies, that trust has enormous value. It is true that today there are movements with more power reserve, greater precision, or better finishes. and in the future, even more competitive alternatives will continue to appear. But that does not change what the NH35 has already achieved, because it has ceased to be just a movement. It has become a benchmark, a standard, and one of the most important calibers in modern watchmaking. And very few movements can say that. If you ever buy an automatic watch, it is very likely that you will find an NH35 inside. You may never get to see it. You may never take the watch apart to observe it. But every second its hands mark will be the result of the work of a movement designed with a very simple idea: to be reliable. And after millions of units manufactured and millions of wrists around the world, perhaps that is the greatest proof that the Seiko NH35 was not just a commercial success. It was one of the movements that changed modern watchmaking forever. See you in the next video.